Oh, nice. So today we're diving into some pretty fascinating territory.
We are.
Yeah, UAPs. And to help us unpack all this, we're going to be looking at this conversation between Joe Rogan and Luis Elizondo.
Absolutely.
Who, for anyone who doesn't know, was the former head of AATIP.
That's right, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program.
Yeah, and what makes this deep dive really interesting is, I think, we're not just talking about UFO sightings. We're talking about the insights of someone who came at this whole thing with the skepticism of, like, a seasoned counterintelligence officer.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I think is so remarkable about Elizondo's story, is that, he wasn't some, UFO enthusiast looking for, evidence to support what he already believed. He was knee-deep in intelligence operations, right? This is a world where data reigns supreme.
Yeah.
And so when he stepped into this role leading AATIP, he approached UAPs with that same analytical lens.
Right.
Almost by default, assuming that, 99% of these sightings were probably just misidentified conventional aircraft.
Yeah.
He was really looking for concrete evidence, not extraterrestrial fantasies.
Right. Yeah. And one of the things that he brings up, very early on.
Yeah.
Is this 1950 memo from J. Edgar Hoover.
Oh, wow.
Director of the FBI, right.
Right.
And this memo highlights, basically acknowledgement of UAP's near-sensitive military installations.
Right.
And not even recently. We're talking back in the 1950s. Like, this is way before we have technology that could even remotely explain some of this stuff away.
Well, and that's where I think it gets really interesting, right? Because, this early acknowledgement, it speaks to this pattern of secrecy.
Yes.
That has surrounded UAPs for decades, right? And Elizondo attributes this, in part, to the Cold War.
Yeah.
Right? It wasn't just about advanced technology falling into the wrong hands. It was about societal disruption.
Right.
Right. Imagine if the public believed that the U.S. government was grappling with something that was completely beyond our comprehension.
Yeah, it's like a scene out of a spy thriller, right?
Totally.
You've got these two superpowers that are at each other's throats.
Right.
And then you toss in this wild card of UAPs that neither side really seems to understand.
Right. Yeah, and it really speaks to, I think, the level of paranoia that existed at the time, and just how much effort went into controlling information.
Right. And this is where things, I think, start to get even more interesting, is that Elizondo starts talking about these encounters that he had that really sort of chipped away at his own skepticism and left him kind of astounded, frankly. Yeah. And one of these moments happens over dinner.
Okay.
And not just any dinner, but a dinner hosted by Robert Bigelow, the billionaire who was secretly funding UAP research for the government.
Right.
At this dinner, Elizondo finds himself face to face with General Uchoa, a Brazilian military official who led the investigation into the Colares incident in Brazil. And this, incident involved days of UFO sightings, even alleged physical evidence.
Wow.
Now, Elizondo doesn't really get into the specifics of that evidence in the podcast, but what he does highlight is just the sheer gravity of the general's concern, like his unwavering belief in the reality of this phenomenon.
Got it. So this is a seasoned counterintelligence officer hearing firsthand from a respected military figure.
Yes.
Who personally investigated a major UAP event.
Exactly.
Wow, that's got to plant a seed of doubt.
It does, and you can tell in the interview, like, this is one of those moments where he's like, okay, wait a minute.
Right.
And it causes him to dig even deeper.
Yeah.
And the more he digs, the more compelling the evidence becomes. And this kind of all culminates with his first encounter with actual UAP footage.
Okay.
And we're not talking about, like, blurry, greeny blobs here.
Right.
This is high-definition, military-grade footage of a wedge-shaped craft, silver metallic.
Wow.
Moving in ways that defy conventional aerodynamics. And what really struck Elizondo was not just the craft itself, but the fact that it was captured with such clarity.
Right.
There was no room for doubt about its existence.
It was like seeing something impossible, but in sharp detail.
Exactly. And this was just the tip of the iceberg.
Okay.
As Elizondo delves further, he encounters I think even more baffling accounts.
Yeah.
But this one story of a massive underwater object dwarfing the size of an oil rig.
Wow.
And moving at incredible speeds, like hundreds of knots, which If you know anything about, submerged vessels that size, it's practically impossible.
Right.
And this wasn't just a blip on a sonar screen, right?
Okay.
We're talking multiple reports from the Navy.
Okay.
With their reaction essentially being, well, it's there, so we'll just navigate around it.
We go around. That's not exactly the response you would expect from, the world's most powerful Navy.
Right.
Like, it almost suggests this level of caution,
yeah.
right? Or even respect for these objects.
Right.
It's like they stumbled upon some kind of, underwater alien highway.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, we better not disrupt traffic.
Right, exactly. And as if that wasn't enough.
Right.
A gigantic underwater speedster.
Right.
Elizondo then shares this other chilling account. This time from a helicopter crew on a mission to recover a test-fired cruise missile in the Caribbean.
Okay.
So picture this. They're about to retrieve this missile from the ocean.
Right.
When this colossal, black circular object, described as being the size of a small island, emerges from the depths.
What?
Churning the water like a scene straight out of Jaws.
Oh my God.
This massive object then proceeds to position itself right next to the cruise missile.
Wow.
And before anyone can react, sucks it down into the abyss.
Oh my gosh.
Vanishing as quickly as it appears. I mean, that's the kind of story that makes you, not want to go in the water ever again,
Right.
But I think what's even more interesting than the events themselves is how are these things operating? How can something that massive just disappear into the ocean like that? What kind of technology are we even talking about here?
Right. Well, I mean, this is where I think the conversation really starts to take an even more kind of, mind-bending turn.
Yeah.
Because Elizondo emphasizes this point that we're dealing with something here that might function entirely outside of the known laws of physics.
Right.
That our human perception, as he puts it, is simply too limited.
Yeah.
And, he starts talking about these things called transmedium vehicles, right? Describing craft that are capable of moving seamlessly between air, space, and even water.
Wow.
And we're not talking about, like a high-tech plane that can, land on a runway and maybe float for a little bit. These objects seem to defy our very understanding of propulsion and aerodynamics.
Right. Like it's one thing to be able to, to fly through the air. It's another thing to then just seamlessly transition into water.
Right. Exactly. Like it's not even a thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Elizondo even goes so far as to kind of delve into this realm of theoretical physics here, mentioning the work of Dr. Hal Puthoff, who's explored this idea of, manipulating gravity and space-time.
Right.
And I know for a lot of people that might sound pretty out there, but the thing is, what seems like science fiction one day often becomes, scientific reality the next.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what Elizondo seems to be suggesting is that these UAPs might not be using conventional propulsion, like jet engines or rockets.
Right.
Instead, they could be creating what he calls a warp bubble around themselves.
Okay.
Essentially distorting the fabric of space-time.
Interesting. So instead of battling against, air resistance or water resistance.
Right.
They're actually manipulating the space around them to move.
Essentially. Yeah. I mean, it's a mind-blowing concept to try to wrap your head around.
It is.
But think about it this way, right?
Okay.
If you fold a piece of paper in half, two distant points on that paper suddenly touch.
Right.
So rather than traveling the entire length of the paper, you can instantly jump between those points by manipulating the paper itself.
Right.
Now, obviously, that's a very simplified analogy, but it kind of helps to visualize how warping space-time could potentially allow for these seemingly impossible maneuvers.
Right. So this warp bubble theory could explain, those incredible speeds that we've been talking about, that instantaneous acceleration, that ability to just move between air and water as if there were no barrier.
Right, exactly. And it's not like this is just, idle speculation. Elizondo mentions that scientists working with AATIP, including Dr. Puthoff, were deeply engaged in complex mathematical calculations to try to explore the feasibility of this concept.
Right.
So it really makes you wonder, if these UAPs are real, if they're not from around here, and if they possess this ability to bend the laws of physics as we know them, I mean, what does that mean for humanity?
Right.
Where do we even begin to process that?
That's the $1 million question. Right. And I think, to Elizondo's credit, he doesn't shy away from that at all.
Yeah.
He really stresses this point that, we can't project our own human intentions and motivations onto whatever intelligence might be behind these UAPs.
Right.
Just because we might react a certain way, it doesn't mean that they would.
Right.
Right? It's like that old saying, like, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, right, it will live its whole life believing that it's stupid.
Right.
We have to be really careful not to assume that their goals are our goals, or even that they operate with the concept of goals,
right,
as we understand them.
Yeah, it's a humbling reminder of just how vast and diverse this universe might actually be, and how much we really just don't know.
Absolutely.
And this kind of naturally leads, I think, into another really crucial aspect of Elizondo's message, which is the importance of government transparency.
Yeah.
He firmly believes that secrets, especially ones of this magnitude, can't be kept forever. He says, eventually they unravel and they often cause more harm than good.
Right. Yeah. And Elizondo is particularly concerned about the potential for corruption.
Oh, yeah.
When information like this is kept hidden from the public.
Yes.
He argues that it creates this environment where, a select few hold all the power over knowledge that really should belong to all of humanity.
Right.
And he's very afraid that lack of transparency is just, it's a breeding ground for abuse.
Right, right. And he goes so far as to even call for amnesty.
Yeah. For those who were involved in past efforts to try to conceal this information.
Wow.
Elizondo believes that a national conversation about UAPs is long overdue.
Okay.
One that is honest, that's open, and most importantly, free from the fear of retribution. It's a pretty bold stance to take, calling for transparency on something that's been, shrouded in secrecy for so long.
Right.
He's basically saying, like, look, we've hidden this for too long.
Right.
Let's bring it into the light and let the public decide what to make of it.
Right, right.
But what I find even more interesting, is how Elizondo kind of connects these larger questions of government transparency and this vastness of the unknown to this deeply personal experience that he shares about his mother's passing.
He talks about being with his mother in her final moments and describes sensing this shift, this kind of essence, I think is the word he uses, leaving her body at the time of her death.
Right.
And you can tell, like, this experience had a profound impact on him.
Right.
It raised these questions for him about the nature of consciousness and what might exist beyond our physical form.
Yeah.
And this is where I think Elizondo kind of beautifully links this very personal, very human experience to this broader UAP discussion.
Okay.
It's like, he's suggesting that just as there might be more to human consciousness than we can currently grasp, there might also be much more to this universe than we can perceive with our limited senses.
It's like he's drawing this parallel, right?
Yeah.
Between the mysteries that are within ourselves and then these mysteries that are, out there in the cosmos.
Yes.
If we can accept that there are, parts of our own being that we don't fully comprehend, then why should we be so quick to dismiss the possibility that something beyond our understanding exists in the vastness of the universe?
It's a really powerful connection that he's making, and it leaves you with this sense of wonder and a thirst, I think, for exploration. Yeah. And I think ultimately that's the message that Elizondo leaves us with is this challenge, right? To not meet this possibility of us not being alone with fear or denial, but with curiosity and a willingness to explore the unknown.
Absolutely. And he reminds us that the universe is this vast and mysterious place.
Yes.
Right. Filled with endless possibilities. And really, a big part of Elizondo's message is this call to embrace that wonder of discovery, right? To acknowledge the limitations of our current knowledge.
Yes.
And to keep asking questions, right?
Sure.
Because as Elizondo's own journey shows us, the more we learn, the more we realize how much more there is to learn.
Exactly.
So who knows? Who knows what incredible discoveries might be waiting for us out there if we can just open our minds to that possibility.
It really is an incredible thought to kind of leave you with, right? Yeah. There's so much out there that we don't know, and to think that we might not be alone in this vast universe, it's a pretty amazing thing to consider.
Absolutely. Yeah. It really puts things in perspective.
It does. It does. Yeah. So on that note,
right.
I think we'll wrap up this deep dive.
Sounds good.